Welcome back. Hope you all enjoyed your lunch. And I know a good number of you went into the expo area and had learned a lot, had some great sessions. So thank you for that. Um, Again, my name is Michelle Watson, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to our afternoon keynote presenter, Kim LaMontagne. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsors. We would like to express our sincerest gratitude to our sponsors who help make today's conference free of charge. Our hope sponsor is Johnson & Johnson, and we will share a recorded message from Ward Bennett of Johnson & Johnson at the closing session this afternoon. We'd also like to thank the New Hampshire Community Behavioral Health Association, WellSense Health Plan, and AmeriHealth Caritas New Hampshire for being our workshop sponsors. So now I'd like to welcome back NAMI New Hampshire's Executive Director, Susan Stearns, to introduce Kim LaMontagne. Here you go, Susan.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, folks. I'm honored today to introduce our afternoon keynote speaker, our own Kim LaMontagne. Kim is a corporate trainer on mental health, international speaker, author, and president of Kim LaMontagne, LLC. She's also a state trainer and teacher for NAMI, a mental health first aider, and a certified facilitator of addiction awareness training. Kim was a top performing professional who suffered in silence with depression, anxiety, alcohol misuse, and intense suicidal thoughts. She feared judgment, retribution, job loss, and damaging her professional integrity if she spoke openly and acknowledged that she needed help. As a result, she remained silent and almost lost her life. A conversation with an observant leader was the turning point that changed and saved her life. After 16 years sober and healthy, she teaches leaders how to create a culture where everyone feels safe speaking openly about mental health. Her mission is to share her lived experience to teach leaders how to create a safe culture where everyone is empowered to speak openly about mental health. In today's afternoon keynote session, From Recovery to Resilience, Leading with Purpose and Compassion, Kim celebrates 16 years of sobriety and shares her transformative journey from battling alcohol addiction and mental illness to becoming a beacon of hope and change. Now a sought-after trainer for leaders, Kim draws on personal experiences to highlight the intersection of resilience, mental health, and effective leadership. We hope you'll discover actionable strategies today to foster a mentally healthy workplace, reduce stigma, and build cultures of empathy and support. This session offers a compelling message of growth, courage, and the profound impact of prioritizing mental health in both personal and professional spheres. It's all yours, Kim.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan. That was a wonderful introduction, and it is absolutely an honor to be here. And thank you all for attending. I'm looking, there's about 57 of us here today, so I'm so excited that you're here. And as Susan had mentioned, I will be sharing my own personal story of how I navigated alcohol misuse, depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts in the workplace while remaining a high-performing corporate executive. So let me make a quick prayer to the technology gods and make sure that I can share my screen appropriately, because I do have a slideshow for you. And hopefully you can all see that. Can everybody see? Okay, great. Wonderful. So on your screen are 3 versions of Kim LaMontagne over a 10-year time period. That photo on the left is probably the worst photo I could ever find, and it's my passport photo from 2008. The photo in the middle is me in 2013, and then the photo of me on the right is in 2018. And you can see a great progression in these photos because I've been now sober from alcohol for just about 16 years. I'm in my 16th year of sobriety right now. But prior to that, I was a high-performing corporate executive. I was a leader. I was a mentor. I was a coach. I was a mover and a shaker. I was an out-of-the-box thinker, the one that people came to for questions, for problems, for coaching. But no one knew that behind all that performance, even though I was a high performer in the workplace, wine was my vice. Every single day, at the end of the day, never during the day, but as soon as the clock struck 5 o'clock, I was drinking 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 8 glasses of wine every single night. Those glasses of wine led me to complete inebriation, blackouts, and hangovers. But I got up every single day and I went to work. And I hid behind my performance intentionally. I intentionally hit those numbers. I intentionally overperformed because I didn't want anyone to see what was going on in the background. I was a complete failure in my mind. I felt completely worthless because I personally could not control my drinking, which led me to severe depression, suicidal thoughts that were unrelenting, and anxiety that was through the roof. And my corporate career, the majority of it, I was in an outward facing business development sales role. So you can just imagine how someone with depression and anxiety, how difficult it could be for that person to operate in an outward bound facing sales position. But that's what I did. I had the family, I had the house, I had the car, and I had the high powered job. But at the end of the day, all of that didn't matter because wine was what was fueling my ability to get through each and every single day. Another piece of my story that I've just begun sharing, this is only the second time I've actually shared this slide, is that I was addicted to painkillers and I didn't even realize it when I was working in corporate. And I want to share this story because I know that there's such an epidemic of opioids, and many times it's co-occurring with mental health conditions. But I had 4 shoulder surgeries over the course of time while I was in corporate America. And I was given Vicodin for pain management. And I enjoyed those Vicodin. I didn't enjoy the pain that was associated with what I had to go through in terms of recovery. But the Vicodin, I would take them as long as I could, and I enjoyed every single moment I was taking those painkillers because it took the pain away. It took the pain of life away as well. Well, it wasn't until I became sober and I was sober on my journey from alcohol that I was prescribed Vicodin one more time. And I recognized that my sobriety from alcohol also needed to include sobriety from opioids. Now, I wasn't misusing them for a lengthy amount of time. I was misusing them or using every single one of them that were prescribed to me, and then asking for more until I couldn't get more. But when I became sober, I had my tonsils removed and was prescribed Vicodin and immediately recognized that it was a problem for me. So all of my medical charts currently are flagged no opioids, and that's actually at my request. But during all of this time, as a high performing executive, I felt like a complete and utter imposter. I was a chameleon in the workplace. Like I could blend in with anyone. I could have conversations at multiple different levels and blend in with anyone, even though I might be standing there with a massive hangover. I could blend in with anyone. That made me a little bit on the dangerous side because no one had a clue that the high performer on the team was experiencing mental health challenges, suicidal thoughts, and alcohol misuse. No one had a clue. And as a matter of fact, there was one particular instance when I was at a business development sales summit and I won Director's Choice Award. Going back to that previous slide, the word imposter was on there. I felt like a complete imposter that night that I got the Director's Choice Award because I knew that my performance indicated that I deserved that award. But I myself didn't think I deserved it at all because I knew I had a dark secret. Because that same night that I won Director's Choice Award, I became so intoxicated with all of my other coworkers, and I slept through the hotel fire alarm. Yes, there was a fire alarm at my hotel the same night that I won Director's Choice Award, and the entire hotel evacuated except for one person. That one person was me. I could go on and on about different things that have happened to me in my life, in terms of negative things that happen in terms of the alcohol and also my mental health challenges. But what really led me to deciding to make a change in my life and really get a hold of what was really gripping me, and that was the alcohol, is the fact that in 2009, on July 4th, 2009, I had a party at my house and we had a fire pit in the driveway. And I woke up on July 5th and was told that I was dancing the night before, and I was so intoxicated that I tripped and almost fell into the fire pit in my driveway. That was the day that I said to myself, I need help. I need help. And I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to turn. I was too ashamed to ask for it. I was married at the time and couldn't even acknowledge to my husband that I needed help, but I knew deep down inside that I needed to stop drinking and I needed to get myself healthy. It took me almost 2 weeks, but on July 16th, 2009, I think the majority of you are in New Hampshire right now. The July 16th, 2009, I was in Monadnock, New Hampshire, or Peterborough, New Hampshire, at Monadnock Community Hospital. I had just had a really great day at work and I was driving back home crying. I lived in Derry, New Hampshire at the time. I pulled over at the Mall of New Hampshire and parked in the parking lot between Sears and Old Navy. I don't know if both of those stores are still there now, but there was a Sears and an Old Navy at the Manchester Mall. And I picked up my cell phone at 4:45 in the afternoon. And I called my doctor's office and said, I need to make an appointment for a personal matter. Well, the universe conspired, and that day I got an appointment with my doctor's office 30 minutes after calling. So by 5:15 that day, I was in the doctor's office, curled up in a ball, and this nurse practitioner walked in, a young man, glasses, curly hair, extremely nice man, walked in and found me kind of just curled up in a ball crying. And when I gained my composure and was able to tell him why I was there, and at that point, I no longer use this word, but at that point, I called myself an alcoholic. I call myself a person now, and I live with alcohol misuse. There's a big difference. And we laughed, we cried, we talked, we got very, very, just asked a lot of questions. And he basically turned to me and said, Kim, I'm going to help you and we're going to do this together. And it was because of him that I am able to stand on stages today and really talk about why it's so important for us to not be ashamed if we're having a problem with mental health or with substance misuse. Oh, thank you for the hearts, everyone. I love it. Yeah, my doctor saved my life. He was my nurse practitioner saved my life. He was the most amazing, kind human being that day. And oh, I love all the love. Thank you all. Um, so believe it or not, there was still so much shame and guilt and fear and stigma that was in my own mind about what I was going through, entering into sobriety, going to AA meetings, not drinking anymore, having to tell people why I wasn't drinking, avoiding those conversations, changing my social circles so no one would figure me out. There was 7 years in the workplace that I never said a word to anyone as to the fact that I was on my journey of sobriety. And it was because I was too ashamed. Because if I acknowledged that I was sober, then it meant at some point I wasn't sober. And to me, that meant unworthy, stigmatized, person living under a bridge. I mean, I had this whole picture in my mind of someone who was not sober, what they should look like. And that wasn't me at all, but I felt like that. So I remained silent for 7 years of my sobriety. And I would never do that again. If I had the opportunity to turn back time, I would have spoken about it a lot sooner. Because during those 7 years, my mental health was the worst in my life that it's ever been. Even though I was on my journey of sobriety and so proud of myself, I still felt like a failure. I still felt like there was something wrong with me, that I could get fired, demoted, or just judged if I told someone I'm on my journey of sobriety. So I remained silent. And in 2013, I almost took my own life. And it wasn't until after concealing my depression and suicidal thoughts, it wasn't until I realized that I was a complete chameleon in the workplace that a leader in 2016, a leader of mine, finally noticed the subtle signs of what was going on with me and had the conversation with me that changed my life. She lived in Newark, New Jersey. I lived in Derry, New Hampshire at the time, and we both worked remotely. And she called me one day and said, Kim, I want to do a field visit with you in Boston. Let's schedule some time. Little did I know that she was going to arrive in Boston, and we were not scheduled to do a full day's worth of forecasting and numbers and road mapping of clients. And she did not want to do any work at all. We did one sales call, but other than that, she looked at me and said, Kim, are you okay? And my knee-jerk reaction was, yeah, I'm great. I'm doing great. Look at my numbers. And then she followed it up with, and are you truly okay? I'm noticing, this is what she said, I'm noticing that you're not as engaged with the team as you used to be. Your numbers are still great, but you're just not as engaged. Are you okay? I'm noticing that you've canceled a couple of one-to-one meetings. That's not like you, Kim. Are you okay? She highlighted the things that she noticed, and as she was highlighting them to me, she was completely non-judgmental. There was no shame or stigma. She was just a person speaking to me, asking me if I was okay. And it was because of that conversation that I took some extra time off around Memorial Day weekend 2016. I acknowledged that I wasn't okay. She was stunned. She had no idea what was going on in the background behind all my performance, but I told her everything. She gave me extra time off, which I took. And I went on a spiritual retreat and I found a speaker that changed the way I think about my own thoughts and changed my life forever. But it was because of that leader with the conversation with that leader that I went from the picture on the left to the picture on the right. And what I've learned along the way is that it's okay to not be okay. Asking for help is a sign of courage, not failure. And what I've also learned is that my story in any way, shape, or form is not unique. Because as a corporate trainer on mental health and as a speaker, I have given hundreds of speeches, which include my story. And to this day, there has not been a single speech that I have delivered or training that I have delivered where someone hasn't reached out to me either by email, instant message, LinkedIn, to say, Kim, I heard your story today, and I could see pieces of myself in your story. Thank you for being so courageous. I even had a double board certified pediatric surgeon walk up to me one day and say, Kim, today is the first day that I feel like I'm a person and not an alcoholic. Thank you for opening my eyes on the power of words. So my story is not unique, but what is unique is that I'm willing to stand up here and I'm willing to really be vulnerable and talk about the things that I'm not really proud of, I'm ashamed of, but that shame has gone away from me because I know that I was doing the best I could with what I had at the time. Thank you for the love, everyone. I appreciate it. I wish I could see you all. I'm just seeing my screen and I know how many people are here. And once again, I'm so glad you're here. And I hope that this is touching you in a way that if you yourself are going through struggles, that you're recognizing that it's okay if you're not okay. So when I say my story's not unique, let's just get into some statistics. 1 in 5 people are living with a mental health condition, yet we are still afraid to talk about it. We're still afraid to have conversations about it. Mental illness is more common than cancer, diabetes, and heart disease combined, yet we're still afraid to talk about it. There's still shame and stigma around mental illness, but not about physical conditions. Living with a mental health condition is not a moral failure. This is something that I believed for such a long time, which is what contributed to my 7 years of silence. And again, if I could turn back the hands of time, I would have asked for help a lot sooner than I did. Because those 7 years of silence were just awful for me. Even though I was doing the best thing I could for myself, and that was to quit drinking, my mental health, I didn't realize how bad it was. Now that I look back on it, I really wish that I had reached out sooner to say I'm not okay. But I felt like a failure. I felt like a complete failure and an imposter. If you're talking about mental health conditions in the workplace, the impact of depression and anxiety costs the global economy $1 trillion per year in lost productivity. So if you're in a leadership role in an organization, you're thinking that mental health isn't affecting your bottom line, it absolutely is. Substance misuse costs companies $81 billion on an annual basis. That's a lot of money. And according to HR leaders, 67% believe that substance abuse or substance misuse is a serious problem because 1 in 10 full-time employees has an addiction and 70% of illicit drug users are actually employed. I fall into that, or I fell into that category. Mental health conditions are the leading cause of disability across the globe. Honestly, looking back on it, I thought about going out on disability myself personally, and that would have cost my company money. I thought about entering into a mental health program or behavioral health unit, but I was too afraid to do that. But that would have cost my company money, but it would have been money well spent because it was the treatment that I probably should have had a long, long time ago. But again, I can't turn back the hands of time. I can just really learn from my experience, share my experience, and hope that it speaks to others to help them navigate whatever they're navigating. People living with a mental health condition, they often face rejection, bullying, and discrimination. This is true. And some of this goes down to the language that we're using around mental health conditions. And there's a section at the very end here that we're going to talk very quickly about the power of words. And you'll see how the discrimination, bullying, and rejection could occur just because of some of the words that we may be using. So I fell into this category right here. Many employees are afraid to ask for help because of fear of judgment, retribution, or job loss. I was petrified that I was going to lose my job if I asked for help, so I remained quiet. I didn't have a motto, but if I did, it would be, put the mask on so no one knows what's going on behind the scenes. And I really thought that I was all by myself feeling that way, but turns out I'm not alone. Less than half the adults get the help that they need, and this is really in part due to stigma. Absolutely due to stigma, because many times people are afraid to ask for the help that they need because they don't want to be seen as weak or incapable. So, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the most effective antidote to addressing stigma in the workplace is direct contact between peers. And I'll give you an example of this. I don't know how many of you here within your organization, if there's a peer support network, but in 2017, remember, I got sober in 2009. I had that conversation with my leader in 2016. And in 2017, my vice president had acknowledged that I was doing a lot of work in the area of mental health and well-being and starting to share my story. So we had a business development sales summit coming up, and she asked me if I would do a presentation on mental health in the workplace. And I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that. Now, that presentation is for my whole work family. Now, my work family included at this company all of these people, vice presidents, HR, marketing, business development, directors, my own colleagues. She asked me to do a speaking engagement on mental health. But I don't know if she realized that that also involved sharing my story. And I was petrified in 2017 to share my own story because remember, I was completely silent about my recovery. Well, that day in 2017, I stood in front of my entire work family and I shared the massive depression, the major depression, the anxiety, the suicidal thoughts, the alcohol misuse. At that point, I didn't talk about the opioid misuse, or actually, I wasn't misusing it. I was taking it as directed. I was just enjoying it too much. And I stood in front of my entire work family and I laid it all out and I spoke to them about what was going on in my life behind the scenes and behind all of the performance that they were all looking up to. Well, what happened is after hearing my story, 8 of my own colleagues acknowledged living with a mental health condition. I had no idea that that day, by me standing up and sharing my own story, that number one, people would cry, which they did. Number two, that people wouldn't move an inch because they didn't want to miss a word that I was saying. And that's actually what happened. No one got up for coffee. No one went to the bathroom or was even having any side conversations. It was all focused on what I was saying. And 8 people, one by one, took me aside in confidence to say, thank you so much for sharing your story, Kim. I suffer too. Or my child does, or my husband does, or I myself have been sober for X amount of years. So peer support in the workplace is a big piece of creating a mentally healthy workplace. And if you don't have a peer support network or a formal peer support network, I would highly recommend that you investigate putting together a peer support group. And I know NAMI has peer support groups as well, but even in your own workplace, peer to peer and sharing our stories can make all the difference in the world. So how do we overcome some barriers? How do we actually have these conversations about mental health in the workplace? Well, we need to address that through awareness campaigns, provide anonymity for those who want to seek help, because many times people want to seek help, but they're too afraid to ask or to be seen, or um, to really just surrender. Encouraging open communication without fear of repercussions, or in ensuring mental health resources are visible and accessible. So I want you to think, if you're in a leadership role, if someone were to come to you right now and say that they're experiencing some mental health challenges, would you know exactly what resources are available through your organization to be able to help that person? If you don't, I highly recommend researching that, speaking with your director or your own higher up, speaking with someone in HR to find out, do we have an employee assistance program? Do we have any additional coaching or support programs? Do we have a mental health benefit within our health insurance? Do we have any subscriptions to things like the Calm app? What resources do we have to offer? And then, kind of like if you are getting ready to have a babysitter for the first time and you put down the phone number of everyone possible, in case of emergency, call this person. If this person happens, call this person. It's the same thing with the mental health resources. Excuse me. We should all have a list that is accessible, maybe even putting it on an index card or a business card, depending on how many resources you have, and then spread it widely so that everyone is aware of all of those resources that are available to them. And then, what is the role of a leader when creating a mentally healthy workplace? Well, it's setting the tone for mental health awareness. So, educating your employees as to why you are bringing awareness to mental health and well being in the workplace. Communicate openly and empathetically, and then model that healthy behavior, equaling work-life balance, and then providing those resources to support mental health and well-being, which goes back to what I just spoke about, having a list of resources that are available. So I'll give you a quick example, and this will come up in the EAP as well. I was training a group of leaders a couple of years ago. They were all in the C-suite level, and I was training them on how to create a mentally healthy workplace. And when we started speaking about the employee assistance program, someone in the group raised their hand and said, I've been with this company for 16 years, and I never knew that we had an employee assistance program. And I'm sure many of you are probably, jaws dropping, like, oh my word, really? How can that be? I don't know how this person didn't know, but just think of the tone and the available resources that may or not be getting down to that person, or people who need those resources. So as leaders, it's our responsibility to really know what we have to offer, and then be able to cascade that information down to our own employees so that they can access and utilize those resources and make a difference in each other's lives. Leaders have the power to transform the workplace, is something that I've always said when it comes to training leaders on mental health. Some strategies to foster a mentally healthy workplace. Regular mental health check-ins. I mean, look what that leader did to me back in 2016. flew all the way from Newark, New Jersey to Boston. And I'm not saying that you all have to hop on a plane and speak with your employees, but she had a gut feeling that something was wrong. And one of the things that I want to note about her is that she's a very transactional leader, but that day she was more transformational in coaching. It was very clear to me that she took off that managerial or director hat and just put on like, I'm your coworker, I'm your colleague, I'm your friend. She was still my leader, but she created that safe space where I felt safe enough saying, oh, you know what? I'm not okay. Flexible work arrangements. You could have an employee in your organization who all they need is just a flex schedule, and it could make a huge difference in their life. And then having workshops and training on stress management and resilience. Committing to mental health as a top priority, and then top-down leadership communication. Leadership training on mental health. So I know on the previous slide, I had mentioned training on mental health and resilience. That should be for everyone. But then specifically, leadership training on mental health so that your leaders know what the signs are to look for, how to open up a safe conversation, what to ask, what not to ask, and how to ask it. Recognizing that they are a leader and not a counselor, unless they have counseling credentials behind their name, and that's their role. So leadership training on mental health, eliminating stigma, and then creating that peer support network. Those are all things that are going to help create a culture where people feel safe speaking openly about mental health. And then fostering that psychological health and safety. Developing procedures to recognize and respond to crisis situations. Reviewing and improving the return to work strategy and accommodation, and then partnering with your employee assistance program. And as I mentioned before, EAP programs, the national usage rate is 3 to 5%. 3 to 5%. And about 75% of companies actually offer an employee assistance program. But don't assume that everyone is aware of the EAP and how it works. There's many people, like I just shared in that story about the group of C-suite leaders that I trained, that one of them, 16 years, didn't even know that it existed. She knows now. So how do you bring awareness to the employee assistance program? We'll add a link to the EAP in the signature line of your email. That's a quick and easy fix, a very simple way for any email that you send out to be able to have that resource at the very bottom of the email. Posting flyers in public locations, which is required, but then posting them in private locations as well, such as bathrooms, bathroom stalls. I say that because when I travel through the airport, many times in the bathroom stall, there are posters in there for sex trafficking, for human trafficking, for someone who is having issues, domestic violence. Those are all posted in private locations. So the same thing with the EAP. Prepare leaders with the information and then discuss that employee assistance program at every single offering. And then lastly, share your experience. I'm going to sit on this one for a minute and just really kind of talk about, there's a lot of fear when people want to reach out and ask for help. And if you yourself, even if you're not in a leadership role, if you yourself have utilized an employee assistance program, I encourage you to share your experience. I encourage you to do that because many people fear what's on the other end of that toll free or whatever number it is that they're calling. They don't understand what the process looks like. They don't understand maybe what the confidentiality looks like. Maybe they don't know how it works, what the time frame is, who they'll be connected to, what the conversation will look like. So every employee assistance program is different, but I encourage you, if you've utilized it, to share your story. And if you're in a leadership position, it's even more imperative that you share your story if you feel comfortable, because it illustrates that this is a service that I want to use. This is a service that's beneficial. This is what it looked like when I went through this conversation at the Employee Assistance Program. This is how they set me up. And then this is what the plan is that they came up with. So I would highly recommend that you share your experience if you've experienced that before. And then the last thing that we can do in terms of normalizing or creating a mentally healthy workplace is normalizing conversations about mental health. I know back in the 80s, we had AIDS and HIV, and there was a lot of stigma about that disease. And we've learned so much. We've learned so much about what it is not, how it's transmittable. And we're learning so much now about mental health, about well-being, about substance misuse. So, and the conversations are happening, but there's still some stigma, and there are still words that are being used that are perpetuating that stigma, which is why I wanted to talk about the power of words during this segment. So on your screen are stigmatizing words and a couple of phrases. And I don't know if someone can see, or if you can put it in I think the chat is off, but then we have a question and answer. And I don't know if Karen can jump in at this point or not, but I'd love to know if any of you on this call today have used one or more of these words. And you can write yes if you have, or no if you haven't. And I'll give you a minute to do that. Oh, I see people raising their hand. Okay, that's what you can do. Raise your hand. That's what I can do. If you can see, raise your hand if you use those words. Yes. Okay, there we go.
And we have lots of yeses in the Q&A.
We do in the Q&A. Okay. Hopefully we're not still using these words, but after today, I hope that we won't. And I will share for you the what's behind it. So every single one of these words on your screen is stigmatizing. There's nothing, every single one of them is like, it's like a 10-pound weighted blanket that is just weighing every single one of these words down with stigma, with unworthiness, with fear, with shame, alcoholic, addict, nuts, junkie, psycho, crazy, on or off the rocker, drama queen, frequent flyer. That's frequent flyer. If you don't know, that's many times, and it could be used in other industries too, but primarily it's used in the healthcare industry, where someone might come into, say, the hospital or the doctor's office on a regular occasion for, I don't know, opioid medication, or they're coming in with a psychiatric episode, or they're considered frequent flyers because they're constantly coming back, and they could be considered harassment. I'm not sure, but it's a very negative way to refer to a person. and then saying on or off the wagon, nut job, nutcase, and then the word admit. That word right there can be stigmatizing, and I'm not sure who it was from NAMI, New Hampshire, but it was someone from NAMI, New Hampshire who actually taught me about that word, because in my social media graphics, I think I said in one of my posts, I think I had said, it's courageous to admit when you need help. And someone from NAMI, and I can't remember who it was, reached out to me to say, I invite you to change the word admit over to acknowledge. Because when we admit something, it seems like we're doing something wrong. But when we acknowledge something, it has a much more positive connotation. And ever since then, every time I put this slide up, people always go to the admit and say, why is that on there? But that's the reason why. And I'm glad that you love that. If you just learned that today, I am super happy. And you could be in a conversation and someone, comes to you and acknowledges that they're having a problem. Instead of saying, thanks so much for admitting this to me, it's thank you so much for trusting me enough to acknowledge this information and share it with me. Such a difference when we tell someone that we're proud of them for admitting it versus acknowledging it. So what we want to do is, instead of using any one of those words on the screen, we want to use, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but person-centered language. And what that means is, I am a person who is living with a mental health condition, living with substance misuse. I'm not a junkie. I'm not crazy. I'm a person living with a mental health condition. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a person and I live with alcohol misuse, or a person living with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, someone who's in recovery, or someone who relapsed, or someone who acknowledged. Some phrases that we want to remove. I'd love to know in the Q&A if, after reading the list of phrases here, I'm so OCD, I'm ADD, I'm anxious, suck it up, buttercup, that's insane, stop being so paranoid, snap out of it, it's all in your head. I'd love to know if you've used any of these phrases. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up or raise your hand. And then in the Q&A, I'd love to hear, what are some other phrases that maybe you've used, but after today, you're going to not be using those. So Karen, I think I need a little bit of your help identifying what's in the Q&A. Anything coming in the Q&A in terms of what phrases that we've used?
I have heard just get over it.
Yep. That's another one. Yep. That's another one. Anyone else? Any other phrases that you can think of that you've said that you're now recognizing are stigmatizing?
I've used pick up the pieces of your shattered life
Oh,
or move on.
move on. Yep. Continue to move on.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So let me do a sample conversation just so you can hear the difference in the power of language. And then I'll focus on the conclusion, and then I'll open it up for some questions and answers. And just know that during this segment, I am an open book, and I encourage you to ask questions, and I encourage you to ask questions about creating a mentally healthy workplace. Ask questions about how I got through. This is your time to ask questions. So before doing that, I just wanted to kind of share something that, and I've been part of conversations like this, but you could be in the workplace or you could be in a personal conversation. And that maybe there's 5 of you standing there in a circle having a conversation. And they're talking about their coworker who, maybe his name is John, and they're talking about him being an alcoholic and a junkie because he takes opioids, and he's a, he's a big drinker, so he's an alcoholic and he's a junkie. And they're talking about the fact that he got so drunk over the weekend that he got picked up by the police and he got thrown into the the Valley Street Jail in Manchester, and he spent 2 days there, and the fact that he deserved it, and then the fact that once he got out of the Valley Street Jail, he was thrown up into the loony bin. And then this same group of people was talking about how when he comes back to work, how they're not going to give him the time of day, how they're not going to pay attention to him, to help him, to support him, because he's just a no good alcoholic and a junkie. How safe would you could do a thumbs up if you feel safe in that conversation, or a thumbs down if you feel safe in that conversation, but how safe if you yourself, right? Okay, I'm getting some exclamation points, or yeah, I'm not, or surprise emojis that are coming up. I wouldn't feel safe at all in that conversation, and I've been part of conversations like that in the past where I've heard people speaking about others in that tone. But if we were to switch it to, wow, our coworker John, I had no idea that he was struggling with alcohol misuse. And I didn't know that he was also struggling with substance misuse. And it's a shame what happened to him this weekend, that he was intoxicated and was put in jail, but I'm glad that he is in a safe place now and he's in the local behavioral health unit getting the treatment that he needs. And you know what? When he comes back to work, I am going to make sure that he feels that he is included, that he knows that he's a person first, and I'm going to make sure that he gets connected to all the resources that our company has to offer because he's a person first. Do we feel safer in that conversation? Give me a thumbs up, or a heart, or however you'd like. Yeah, or a clap. Much better. Yeah, there's a big difference when it comes to um using the power of language in the workplace, and it what I'd love to stress upon you yourself is to also be careful about the words that you're using in your own internal dialogue. So instead of calling yourself an alcoholic if you are struggling with alcohol misuse, or if calling yourself crazy or psycho if you're living with a mental health challenge, or telling yourself to snap out of it, it's all in your head. What you're doing is you're stigmatizing yourself. And I encourage you to remove those words, remove those phrases, and see yourself as a person first and not the condition that you live with. And I'll tell you that during my 16 years of sobriety, it took me until 2016 to finally realize that I was a person first. And remember, when I shared my story, my first 7 years, I was completely silent. And during those first 7 years, I was also using all of these words and phrases in my own internal dialogue. So if you can imagine the isolation, I isolated myself. I wasn't speaking to myself in a very kind way. I wasn't speaking to others, so gaining their perspective and their feedback. I was just kind of like in my own little bubble, and I didn't give anyone the chance to help me. Now, and I wish I had a slide for this one, but I don't. Now I actually have a group of people in my circle that I've given permission, if they recognize what's going on, if they can see that they recognize the signs that I'm having a difficult time, and I give them all of my signs. I tell them exactly what to look for, and if you see me doing this, then you know that there's something bad that is going on in the background. So I give those people permission to recognize the sign. I give them permission to tap me on the shoulder, or send me a message, or call me on the phone, or see me in person, and acknowledge the fact that, Kim, I'm seeing this sign and you told me to look for it. And it's important for you to have those accountability partners around you, because our mental health and mental illness itself is it's like a chameleon as well. It is so difficult sometimes to spot when we ourselves are having a difficult time. Sometimes it's easy to spot in other people and not in our own selves. So if we know what our baseline is, and then we know what we can do to help that, we give people permission to recognize, permission to tap me on the shoulder. I tell them exactly what to do to help me. I tell them, please don't come over. Please don't pick me up unexpectedly, because surprises to me are the worst. I love to surprise other people, but I don't like to be surprised myself. I like to know ahead of time if you're coming over. And I'll plan for it. I just need to get my mind in the right space. Please don't pick me up and take me to a store, because that stresses me out. So instead of just hoping that my friends and family will do what's right, I prepare them and I tell them, make me some chicken soup. Maybe text me more frequently. Pick up the phone and let's do a FaceTime or something like that while I'm communicating with them, but I'm not putting myself in that anxious position. So recognize, tap them on the shoulder, and tell them exactly what to do to help you. If they don't know what to do. So I guess, like, have you ever been in the position where you see that someone's struggling, but you wish you could help them and you didn't know what to do? This removes all that ambiguity. Prepare for it ahead of time. It's almost like it's a well-being action plan. These are my signs. If you see them, I give you permission to tap me on the shoulder, and I give you permission to do X, Y, and Z, so that you're not being bombarded by unwanted behaviors. And the person who wants to help you knows exactly what to do. So with that, I know that we are coming at the very end of our session, but in conclusion, I want to share with you all that you are not alone, and recovery is absolutely possible. Leaders have the power to transform the workplace, and words matter. I have been there, and I've navigated a very difficult path along the way. I knew since I was in high school that I had a problem with alcohol, but it wasn't until I was 38 years old that I finally made the decision to remove that from my life. And looking back on it, I had depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts in middle school. So my mental health has been a challenge for me my entire life. The alcohol allowed me to get through it. And then when I removed that, then I dealt with it on my own. But what I wish I could do, if I could do it, is to turn back time and to ask for help sooner than what I did. And if you yourself need help, I encourage you today to reach out to a friend, to a trusted colleague, to NAMI New Hampshire, to your physician, and have a conversation. No fear, no shame, no judgment whatsoever. Let that person know that you are a person and this is the condition that you're living with. And with that, I would love to open it up to some questions. I know we've got about 15 minutes. We could fill that up with some question and answer. And I hope that you enjoyed the content of my story, a little bit of learning and some storytelling along the way. So Karen, I'm going to open it up and see if there's any question in the Q&A.
And Kim, we have a lot of comments and a few questions.
Okay, good.
We had a couple of comments about the word frequent flyers.
Yes.
One, Catalina says our 911 dispatch personnel are begging for help on how to respond to individuals who are frequent callers to 911 and don't know who else to call. They might be better served if they knew better ways to get help.
Oh, that's a tough one. I didn't think about frequent callers to 911. Yeah, I think the end of the long and the short of it is to get them the mental health help that they need. 911 is often called for mental health crisis, which is rightfully so. But I guess I didn't think about them being impacted by frequent callers, which end up being frequent flyers, quote unquote.
Mhm.
But they are people who are experiencing challenges and are going into behavioral health units in the emergency room. So again, it comes down to them getting the help that they need from the professionals, from the clinicians, from the clinical folks that can help them get diagnosed and on a path of recovery.
And somebody else wrote that frequent flyer also refers to an unhoused person. They frequent areas in town because they have nowhere else to go, but it makes people mad. So they refer to the unhoused person as a frequent flyer.
Yeah, that's another segment of the community that gets a lot of stigma, is the unhoused person, the people experiencing homelessness.
And then we had a few more phrases that came in that were, things that we wished we didn't use.
Yes, like what?
I've heard just get over it.
Yep.
You're imagining things.
Oh, that's a good one. And that's a very, very dangerous one.
You're being dramatic.
Mhm.
And I think that's it. We have a few questions.
Sure.
Another comment from Sean who says, I see those who do not have peer and wellness training use the terms in the first responder community, these kinds of terms in the first responder community towards fellow first responders.
Education, education, education. We need to change the words that we're using. And hopefully after today, none of you will be using those stigmatizing words and you can pass on what you've learned to the others that are within your circle.
Um, Eileen wants to know if the slides are going to be available later.
Yes.
Excellent. We will make sure that happens. How can employers support employees who are struggling with a loved one struggling with a substance use disorder? It can be either a child or a partner.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, they have to support the employee themselves, but many times they have programs that actually cover the family member as well. And it's about getting them resources, getting them connected with NAMI to get them some additional resources as well. Um, I know that there is a company out there that I work with called Life Guides, and they provide coaching to employees that are in organizations that subscribe to their service, and it's open to their loved ones as family members as well. Some mental health benefits may extend to the family member as well. So it's first and foremost, take care of the employee, but then find out what resources that are currently being offered are extended to that family member as well. And then find out the free resources that are available to help support that coworker's family.
Excellent. Shelley asks, what is your mental health condition?
My
And
mental health condition, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, I live with major depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, and alcohol misuse and substance misuse. Those are all of my diagnoses.
Eileen says, my internal dialogue is where I need more focus. I need to treat myself as well as I treat others.
That is so true. And there's so many times we focus on the words that we're speaking outwardly that we don't think about how are we talking to ourselves. So I'm glad that you're here, Eileen, and you heard those words. And I hope that you can change your own internal dialogue to see yourself as more of a person first and be kind to your mind. Words matter.
Someone asks, how do you disclose your mental health diagnosis when you feel your employer will not understand or know how to relate to you going forward?
That's the problem. There's not, you have to feel comfortable knowing that your employer is going to understand. You have to feel safe enough to disclose your mental health condition. That's why I work so hard to train leaders to create that culture where it's okay if one of your employees comes forward and acknowledges that they need help and see that as a sign of courage and not weakness. Um, so I would be very careful, acknowledging and sharing that information with your employer. Um, if you don't know how they're going to react and, especially find out what the resources are that are available first and maybe try it from that point first, asking your employer what resources are available and then starting the conversation off that way. But it's employers who don't understand that make it difficult for the rest of us to ask for help.
So we have a few more comments about phrases.
Yeah.
Michelle says, I found that I can substitute the word wild in many situations where the term crazy would be used.
Yes. That's crazy. So easy to say, but
Mhm.
I've kind of rewired my mind to not use those phrases anymore.
And Ebony notes that another phrase is what's wrong with me or what's wrong with you,
Mm,
and emphasizing the word wrong.
right. And me.
What do you think is a better way to phrase that?
What's instead of saying what's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
I would say I need to give myself some space and grace. Why am I feeling this way?
I love that.
Attack it that way. That would be the best way for me to attack it. What's
And
the,
then
why is it there?
yeah. Eileen makes a few comments too. Isolation and anger are symptoms we do not hear a lot about.
I am the queen of isolation when I am not doing well. I can isolate, and Karen, I'm sure you can identify with that. I can isolate for days if I am not in a good situation. I haven't isolated for years, but isolation to me is calming, but I know that it's also it can be deadly.
And there's a difference between isolation and just taking space for myself.
There's a huge difference. The isolation is when you put up a wall and nobody can get through. Taking space is you're just taking a moment, but isolation is putting up that wall or that facade or it's very, very dangerous to isolate because when we isolate, we're left with our own minds, and our minds can be dangerous with some of the words and the thoughts that happen up in there.
And I know for me that you had talked at one point about, people, accountability partners who can notice things that you may do when you're not doing well. And for me, my husband notices that I'm not looking him in the eye.
Ah,
And
and you
that
gave
goes
them permission.
right with the isolation when I can't even connect by looking the person in the eye,
Yep,
it's a good sign that I'm not doing great.
yep. And that's a sign. And then you give him permission to tap you on the shoulder and say, Karen, you're not looking at me, and not to beat you up for it, not to
Right.
chastise you for it, but to just bring it to your attention and help you through it.
So, a lot of thank yous.
Oh, yay.
Eileen also notes that, back to the question we had earlier, that Family Leave Act can be helpful if they can use it. It's there for an employee, at least for the moment.
Correct. Correct. FMLA is what she's talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another phrase I have heard employers say is, we all have our own things, in a response to coming forward about a mental health challenge. How would you respond to that?
Wow. I guess how would I respond to that? I guess I would oh boy, that's a tough one. We all have our own things. I think I would be shocked, first of all, as I am right now. If you've received that response, I'm truly sorry that you've received that response. And I guess I would probably say that I thought that this organization had a mentally healthy culture and a culture of well-being. I'm, speaking to you about something that it's it's physical / mental, and it's preventing me from giving my 100% at work. Can we have a conversation about what that looks like in terms of potentially accommodating me? But I would be shocked to get a honestly, that would be a red flag for me to not be at that company.
Yes.
But that's just one thing, but that's a huge thing. But it's just also one person. It couldn't, maybe it's not the entire company's thought process, but maybe that one person. But that's a rough response.
Disturbing.
That's very disturbing. Did you see my face when you said it?
And we've just got one more comment that I want to
Yes.
give you before we move over to Michelle, which is that Diane says, Kim, thank you for your courage and sharing. So grateful for your bravery. Learned a lot today. And I think a lot of us feel the same way that Diane does.
Oh, you're welcome. You are so welcome. I am so glad to be here, and I'm always honored to share my story and be vulnerable and courageous for the sake of illustrating and to others that you're not alone in reaching that one or multiple people who need to hear what I have to say. So I'm so grateful for you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you, Karen, for helping out with the session. Do you have anything else you want to add, Kim, or are you all set?
No, I am
Okay.
all set. Thank you so much.
We're so happy to have you back in New Hampshire for today,
I
even if
know.
it's virtual, right?
Yes.
So thank you all for joining us in our afternoon keynote presentation. After our 15-minute break, be sure to come back for a presentation from New Hampshire Governor Kelly Ayotte, and she's going to be building a healthier New Hampshire. And then we have 2 more inspiring presentations to round out the day. I know we've talked about putting Kim's PowerPoint, making that available, so we'll make sure that we do that as well. You will be getting an email about an hour after the conference ends today that will include an evaluation, so please fill that out. A certificate will be available after you fill out that evaluation. So I'm going to end that, and we'll see you in 15 minutes with the governor. Thanks so much.